Hi, welcome to Prime Recap. A biology professor develops a substance that can make him lose weight quickly, but every time he ingests the formula, another personality takes control of his body and tries at all costs to eliminate his consciousness. Today we will recap the story of the movie, The Nutty Professor. Sherman is a college professor who, despite his success in his academic life, is very insecure and introverted because of his overweight. Together with his students, Sherman is developing a new substance that can lower body fat levels, but although it has the potential to solve his problem, it is still in the testing phase. Since Sherman's research is costly, the dean of the college takes a potential investor to present the project. But while they are walking around the campus, for some reason all the hamsters manage to escape from the lab, causing a huge mess at the university. When Sherman arrives at the college, he sees the damage his hamsters have caused and goes straight to the laboratory where he finds his students trying to understand what has happened. Thinking about the hypotheses, the professor, who was the last one to leave the laboratory the day before, decides to follow the steps of what he did before leaving, thus discovering that he accidentally bumped into the lever that opens the cages. After finding out what happened, Jason, one of Sherman's students, says that only Shelley didn't escape, an overweight hamster who is the main guinea pig in the research. Upon analyzing her data, Jason finds that after the last dosage of the formula, Shelley's DNA has restructured and she has lost 45 grams since the day before, in other words, a 20% decrease in her weight after a single dose of the substance. With the success of the research, Sherman goes to the dean's office so he can report the results to the investor and thus secure the funding. But when he arrives at the place, he finds the dean alone. Furious, the dean says that the investor got stuck with one of the hamsters that was thrown into her mouth and had to go to the hospital, but before that, she withdrew all her support for the college. Tired of Sherman's screw-ups, which have already caused the university to lose several investors, the dean says he will arrange a meeting with Hartley, an ex-student who seems willing to donate the sum of $10 million to the science department. While the dean keeps complaining and saying that this is the last chance he will give Sherman, a hamster that is trying to climb the light fixture ends up dropping poop right in the dean's mug. When Sherman sees the poo dropping, he tries to tell the dean to throw the drink away, but since he is annoyed, he doesn't even let the professor speak and ends up drinking the coffee. After the meeting with the dean, Sherman goes into the classroom and begins to teach his class, but he ends up being ridiculed even by his students when his belly erases all the chalk from the board. Even though Sherman feels bad about his excess weight after class, he grabs a Snickers from his drawer and starts to eat it on the sly, until suddenly, a woman comes into the room and introduces herself as Carla, the new chemistry teacher. As soon as he sees Carla, Sherman is completely smitten and tries to develop a conversation, but because of his low self-esteem, he fumbles and makes a disastrous first impression. At the end of the day, the professor goes to his mother's house to have dinner with his family, but thinking about losing weight and changing his life, he just nibbles at the food, which causes a general argument. After spending the night arguing with his family about health and being overweight, before leaving, Sherman asks his mother for advice on what to do, and in response, she encourages him to have more self-esteem and do whatever he feels like doing. Thinking about what his mother said, Sherman takes courage and goes to the teacher's house to ask her out, but after ringing the doorbell, he lets his shyness win out and starts to go back home, but Carla opens the door just as Sherman is coming down the stairs. Completely embarrassed, Sherman tries to cover it up by pretending he is doing some exercise, but realizing that this will make no difference, he decides to pluck up the courage and invites Carla to a comedy club for the weekend. After the teacher accepts his invitation, Sherman feels calmer and loses all his weight loss neurosis, going back to his unhealthy habits. But after having a nightmare where he buries Carla in the sand with his weight, Sherman feels insecure again and decides that he will lose weight once and for all. Over the course of the week, Sherman enrolls in every type of activity possible to lose calories, but despite his initial failure, he manages to progress and lose a little weight each day. When the date on the weekend arrives, Sherman goes to the comedy club with Carla and together they sit in the front row to watch the show. After the opening, the host calls Reggie, the evening's comedian, to the stage and he begins his performance. During the show, Reggie makes jokes with several people in the audience and Sherman laughs at all of them, but when he realizes that the comedian is approaching his table, he regrets sitting in front of him and tries to get up with the excuse of going to the bathroom to avoid being the butt of the jokes. But when he gets up, Sherman ends up knocking over some objects on the next table, and when he bends down to pick them up, Reggie sees Sherman in that awkward position and starts making jokes with him, leaving him totally embarrassed. For some reason, even after realizing that Sherman is uncomfortable, Reggie keeps making more and more jokes with him and Carla, leaving them both extremely embarrassed. After the public humiliation show, Sherman takes Carla home and while she tries to pretend that everything is okay, the professor apologizes for what he put her through. After this disastrous date, Sherman goes home where he drowns his sorrows with food until he blacks out. While sleeping, Sherman has a nightmare in which he begins to swell non-stop until he is almost the size of Godzilla, destroying everything around him. Determined to prevent this from happening in real life, Sherman wakes up and goes straight to the college laboratory where he spends the entire early morning locked away making modifications to the slimming formula. After doing all the necessary tests and improvements, Sherman takes a large amount of the substance, but within seconds of ingesting it, he begins to feel ill and passes out in the middle of the lab. While he is unconscious, Sherman's body begins to change until his DNA is completely restructured. When he regains consciousness and sees his reflection in the mirror, Sherman realizes that he has finally become thin and is startled by his appearance, but in a few seconds he grasps what has happened and he begins to celebrate his great achievement. Taking advantage of his new look, the teacher goes to a store and buys all the skinny clothes he couldn't wear before, as well as practicing the physical activities he was training with much more ease. After spending the day doing various activities that he couldn't do before, Sherman returns to the college lab to prepare new doses of the formula when he is surprised by Carla, who is looking for him. Upon seeing her, the man becomes afraid to admit what he has done and pretends to be Buddy Love, a childhood friend of Sherman's. Now feeling much more confident thanks to his new appearance, Buddy pretends that Sherman has told him about the disaster at the meeting and says that the professor has decided to take a few days off. With Sherman supposedly out of the picture, Buddy invites Carla to the comedy club again, but before she even has a chance to respond, Buddy realizes that both his voice and his body are returning to normal. It seems that in humans, the formula lasts only a few hours long. Startled, Buddy practically throws Carla out of the lab and runs for cover while his body finishes transforming. As the day progresses, Carla runs into Sherman around campus and tells him that Buddy has asked her out. Thinking he can't make her have a good time, Sherman tells the teacher to forget what happened between them and insists that she agreed to go out with Buddy. Convinced by Sherman, Carla accepts the invitation and goes to the comedy club. Despite being in Sherman's body, Buddy has a totally different personality and arrives more than an hour late for the meeting. Even with this blunder, Carla agrees to enter the bar together with Buddy, and they sit down at a table at the back where the man devours the entire menu, while waiting for Reggie to take the stage. As soon as the comedian starts his show, Carla says she hates Reggie, but unlike her, Buddy seems to have a lot of fun with the show and encourages him to joke with more and more people. Annoyed by his agitation, Reggie tries to ask Buddy to control himself, but instead the man decides to be part of the show and starts making jokes about the comedian's appearance, starting with his gums and teeth. Being the target of the same kinds of jokes he makes, Reggie begins to feel provoked and starts a joke battle of extremely dubious quality. While they are exchanging insults, Buddy comes on stage and continues to make jokes about Reggie's mother. Feeling disrespected, the man takes off his hat and prepares to fight, but when the comedian tries to land the first kick, Buddy manages to defend himself and hits his head full on the piano, causing him to pass out. After finishing his revenge, Buddy gets off the stage and walks towards the teacher while being applauded by everyone. As he is reaching the table, one of the club's employees appears and Buddy hands him his card to pay the bill. Carla is extremely happy and decides to give the man a chance, but before they can even do anything, once again the effect of the formula wears off and the transformation begins, leaving his lips extremely swollen. Trying to cover it up, Buddy says it is some kind of allergy and starts to run out of the club before the dose of the formula wears off. But as he is leaving, Jason sees that a stranger is using his teacher's credit card and starts running after him. As soon as Jason gets into the car, Buddy continues to transform until Sherman's foot appears, but since it is much heavier, he ends up stepping on the accelerator, making the car go wildly through the streets. When the transformation is complete, Jason finally understands that this is his teacher, but before he can even talk to him, the boy has to call the fire department to saw the car off because Sherman is too big and gets stuck. The next morning, Sherman arrives late and finds only the dean in his office. As soon as he sees the professor, the dean shows him the college accounts where it says that he rented a Dodge Viper for $2,000, but since the car had to be sawed off, the university will have to pay for a new one. Knowing that Sherman can't afford the $47,000 for a new Viper, the dean tells him that he has set up a meeting with Hartley to present the research, but still quite angry, he says that Sherman will be fired and jailed if he fails to secure the college funding. After the conversation with the dean, Sherman goes to the lab and tells Jason that he decided to test the substance to go out with Carla, but the boy explains that this is dangerous, because Buddy's testosterone levels are extremely high, which puts his life at risk and causes Sherman to completely lose control of the situation. Afraid that this will ruin their chance to get the funding with Hartley, Jason advises the teacher to stop turning into Buddy and tell Carla how he really feels. Knowing that Jason is right, Sherman goes to Carla to tell her the whole truth, But when he realizes that the teacher is upset that Buddy has abandoned her without explanation, Sherman gives up telling her about his research and asks her to have dinner with his family. But this was another bad idea. While the two eat, Sherman's relatives are as inconvenient as possible, asking about marriage, whether they will have children, and a bunch of other things, as well as having a farting competition right in front of the visit. After this disastrous dinner, Sherman escorts Carla home while they talk about Buddy, but realizing that she is still upset, he undertakes to look him up. At college, Jason is finishing his funding proposal when he hears strange sounds in the lab. As Jason leaves his desk to investigate, he finds Buddy and asks why Sherman has turned again, since he has to meet Hartley and has promised not to take any more shots. But since he is practically another personality, Buddy ignores everything and just says that he will meet with Carla. Knowing that this could cost both Sherman his job and his college funding, Jason tries to stop Buddy from leaving, but he ends up being tricked and trapped in the lab storage room. Finally free, Buddy leaves college and arranges a surprise at Carla's house along with an invitation to dinner. After getting ready, Carla goes to the restaurant together with Buddy, but while he is asking for a table, the dean sees the teacher and asks for Sherman, saying that he is 45 minutes late for the meeting. Trying to help save the research, Carla asks if Buddy could replace Sherman and present the formula to Hartley, and since he wants to prove that he is better than the professor, he accepts in a heartbeat. Inside the restaurant, Buddy explains to everyone that the fat we consume is distributed throughout our cells, but that by consuming the substance that Sherman has developed, all the DNA can be restructured. This makes the fat cells disappear and leaves people looking much healthier. After the presentation, Hartley says he liked the research and arranges another meeting for Buddy to demonstrate the formula working. Happy that he could convince Hartley, the dean goes to Buddy and invites him to take over the research, taking Sherman's job away. While Buddy is negotiating, Carla is coming out of the bathroom when she hears some women talking about him. Upset by what she heard, Carla goes up to Buddy and slaps him in the face, leaving the restaurant furious. But instead of apologizing, he just ignores her and stays with the girls who were talking about him. To celebrate his success, Buddy invites a crowd to Sherman's house and spends the whole night partying. When dawn breaks, Sherman wakes up with the girls in his bed and finally realizes the damage Buddy has done to his life. To make matters worse, Carla goes to his house and starts knocking on the door. But when she sees how chaotic the place is, she decides to go in to see if everything is okay with him. Hearing the teacher's voice, Sherman rushes over to her to try to get her out before one of the girls wakes up, but Carla starts venting right there about her regret for going out with Buddy. Feeling guilty for making the professor lose his place in the survey, Carla tries to apologize, but while she is talking, one of the girls appears asking for Buddy. Seeing that the trio of girls are there, the woman believes Sherman is helping Buddy and becomes extremely upset with the professor, saying she never wants to see him again. After this further disaster in his life, Sherman goes to the college where he sees that the dean has put Buddy's name on the lab door, and that from now on he will take over both the research and his position as professor. Saddened by all these failures, Sherman goes back to stuffing himself with food in front of the TV while watching his tapes, but in the middle of the tapes, the professor finds a tape that Buddy left behind, telling him to take more doses of the formula, because only then could he have any success. Determined to prove Buddy wrong, Sherman goes to the college lab and throws away the vials with the formula for humans, saying that he will go to the ball to get his life back and that Buddy will never show up again. Before going to the party, Sherman asks Jason to help him throw away all the doses of the substance, but just as the boy is throwing the last bottles into the sink, the professor grabs a can of diet soda and drinks it all in one gulp. As soon as he swallows the soda, Sherman gets a strange taste and begins to feel ill, falling unconscious to the floor. Worried, Jason runs to the teacher, but it's Buddy who gets up in his place. Happy that his plan to fool Sherman worked, Buddy goes to the computer and shows Jason that if he takes 500 milliliters of the substance, he will have enough cellular stability to never be Sherman again. After explaining his evil plan to Jason, Buddy knocks the boy out with one punch and runs to the ball, but the boy wakes up soon after and sees on the computer that Buddy's testosterone levels are 60,000% above normal. As soon as he arrives at the party, Buddy kicks the musicians off the stage and begins to perform his presentation, but at midnight his cells become unstable, causing him to slowly transform back into Sherman. To prove to Hartley that the formula works, as soon as the mutations start, Buddy takes another dose of the formula, making his body thin again. After demonstrating the power that a small dose of the formula has, Buddy takes the half-liter bottle of the substance and says that it will make 180 kilograms of fat disappear, but just as he is getting ready to ingest the liquid, Jason shows up and tells everyone that Buddy is trying to eliminate his teacher. As soon as they hear this, Sherman's parents immediately start looking for weapons to deal with Buddy, but before they can do that, Jason takes revenge for the punches he received and hits one right in the jerk's face. Furious, Buddy prepares to strike back, but just as he raises his fist, Sherman takes control of his hand and prevents him from hitting his student. To stop Buddy once and for all, Sherman grabs his neck, starting an extremely bizarre fight. While they argue and slap each other, Buddy tries to take another dose of the formula to eliminate the professor once and for all, but Sherman manages to stop him at the last second, and after a grim transformation, he finally regains control of his body. Now that Buddy is gone forever, Sherman takes advantage of being on stage and begins to vent about how he felt after years of suffering with being overweight, as well as telling about the whole process of his research. Once he finishes telling the whole story, Sherman admits that he has become obsessed and selfish, as well as admitting that what he did was wrong. Finally, Sherman declares his love for Professor Carla and apologizes to everyone, getting off the stage shortly thereafter. Moved by the professor's words, Carla goes to him and invites him to be her partner at the dance. Anyway, after all the confusion, Carla and Sherman stay together and Hartley finally donate the $10 million funding to the college. So, what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like it and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.